Welcome to the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Today's episode is the second in a three-part series that I'm doing with Lindy Brock, who works with me here at Elliott Wealth Management. We are talking about 12 toxic money beliefs. We broke it into three parts. Last week was part one. We talked about 4 toxic money beliefs. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I would recommend you go back and do so. We talked about money being inherently evil or bad, the concept that rich are evil and corrupt, that money is scarce, and we talked about how some people believe that spending money is a moral failing, that it's wasteful. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the next 4 toxic money beliefs, and I have Lindy back with me to discuss these. Lindy, thanks for taking a few minutes today.
Yes, happy to be here.
So let's jump in and talk about these couple. By the way, if you listen to the first episode, you'll know that Lindy and I didn't talk about these at all. We had the list. We said, let's get on and talk about them. So I think this is part charming and maybe part unprofessional as podcasters. We haven't prepped this at all. So sometimes you'll kind of pick up on that. So this is just natural. So the first one is toxic money belief. Individuals sometimes feel that they have an obligation not to spend their money, but rather to keep it so that they could pass it on to the next generation. And I'll start, Lindy, and then get your thoughts. But this is something that's, I believe, born out of a Depression era mentality in particular. And sometimes you see when we work with retirees where they are reluctant to spend money, to use their money, to enjoy the chapter of their life that comes after work, retirement. And they do it because they feel an obligation. They feel it's their responsibility to leave money to their heirs. And this is something, as a certified financial planner, having been in the business 30 years, that bothers me tremendously, because it's a shame when you see somebody sort of missing out on their own life experiences they could want, that they want to have, that are attainable because they want to leave money to their kids or grandkids. It doesn't make me happy when I see that. Granted, leaving an inheritance, leaving a legacy is honorable. That's good. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's something personally that I would hope to do for my children, but it's not the driving force. And I'll say that years ago, I mean, this is quite a number of years ago, I didn't look it up, but there was a very popular book. It was called Die Broke. The author was on the Oprah Winfrey Show at the time when Oprah Winfrey Show was the dominant show on TV. And it was Die Broke. And the tagline on the book was, I want to have my last check be to the underwriter and I want my last check to be to the undertaker, and I want the check to bounce. That would be perfect planning, that they spent every nickel and barely had enough, not quite enough to handle their funeral. That might be a little bit of extreme, but I like the mentality in that book, which is you accumulate money during your working years, you delay gratification, you plan for the future. You get to retirement age, you are entitled to live your life to the fullest, to enjoy that money, spend the money, have experiences, and also handle bad things may come about, including health outcomes that may mean that you have to spend money on medical bills, nursing homes, that kind of thing. That's what the money is for. So I think it's toxic when you have retirees feel like they need to not do what they otherwise would want to do because they want to pass money on to the next generation or to someone else. What do you think about this topic?
I agree with you. I absolutely love when we meet with clients and we're getting down to what their goals are, and that final goal is I want to die with zero in the bank.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just makes me giddy inside. Like, come on, yes, do it.
Yeah.
And I want to help them do that. But it comes from such a good place and such a place of love for parents to want their kids to have what they didn't have growing up. And they might forget that usually, so the people that this affects obviously are retirees, and they're older, but I don't think they realize that their kids are also older too.
Yes.
Usually when they're passing away, their kids are in their 50s or their 60s, and they have amassed wealth of their own, and it's not necessary for them to pass on their wealth to their offspring. And having conversations with these people, and even having conversations with their kids say, I don't want it. Like,
Yes.
Go spend your money, please. You worked for this, you worked hard, you saved your money. You need to enjoy what you did for yourself. We don't want it. Don't worry about us. And I really think that people need to take that to heart and try to enjoy, with the last thing that we talked about again, like,
Yeah.
enjoy what they worked so hard for.
Yes. And you're right. And I often will talk to clients in this way, is like, if your son or daughter, your children were here, wouldn't they say, Mom, Dad, spend the money, enjoy your life? In most instances, now there's some families where there might be a different toxic money belief. But by and large, the vast majority of the time, the kids would be like, Mom, Dad, enjoy yourselves, do what you need to do. We're okay. So you're right in pointing out that this comes from a place of love, and it's often something that the individual puts on themselves and is not driven by the younger generations applying pressure on them. And I know personally, my in-laws, which are wonderful, I'm blessed, I have a great relationship with them. Years ago, I mean, they're old school money wise. My father-in-law didn't go to college, blue collar, your traditional American success story, growing up poor, not finishing high school, working, building a nice life, raising 2 daughters. It's all good. But their friends were going on a cruise to Alaska, and that was a little excessive for them, outside the box for them. And they were not going to go initially. And I know Joelle, my wife, pointedly said to them, you guys are going. Don't worry about the money part of things. Marlene, which is her sister, we're fine. We're fine. Go with your friends, go enjoy this experience. Don't worry about the money part of things. And that's wonderful, because they did feel a little bit of the pull of not spending money, in part to pass money on. And part of it also was just they're frugal by nature. Now, granted, with all of this, listeners, we're not talking about being reckless with money. This is all within the realm of, is it make financial sense within your current circumstances? You probably should not take a trip around the world if you only have 10 bucks in the bank.
Right.
So that's just assumed in the conversation. I will say too, Lindy, I have a few years on you, is I see less of that mentality than I did earlier in my career. I think this was more prevalent with the generation that was more along the Depression, people that were born in the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. I think you see more of that than today. The baby boomer generation, I think you see a little less of it than you do, or a looser interpretation of this feeling of obligation. And the other thing that I'll say is, if you want to leave money to the children, and that's important, you could also consider a little bit of a different approach, is give them the money so you could see them enjoy the money. Take the family on trips, treat them to something so that you could experience the gifts while you're still alive, and not wait until you're passed on. That seems way more rewarding. And I know in my personal life, my family, my parents, lower middle class. We certainly didn't go hungry, but we certainly did not live the high life. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, didn't have any money. And when he passed away, I don't think there was hardly any money. But I do remember at some point, he bought us a pool, an above ground pool, which me and my 2 brothers, I mean, we loved the heck out of it. I don't know how much it cost. I don't even know if it was responsible or enough, but I remember that as a wonderful gift from my grandfather. And I have fond memories of getting that gift and being a kid, being able to play in the pool. So that's a good example because there wasn't much of an inheritance when he passed away anyway.
I completely agree. During our conversation, it wasn't something that I had thought about beforehand, but I was thinking, I think a way that if the kids know that the parents are saving the money and they don't want it, something that they could do is just say, let's kind of do this together. Let's enjoy this together. Since you want it to go to us, let's go on that vacation with the kids. Let's do this while you're still alive, just so you can get as much enjoyment out of it as we will.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Good stuff. So the next one is not closely related, but it's this toxic money belief that you don't deserve it. You don't deserve the money, which comes from a place of low self-esteem, obviously. So what are your initial comments on that?
So I really thought about this in ways, because I don't think that somebody would know that they have this toxic belief, that they would say to themselves, oh, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. I think this would come more in the way of maybe self-sabotage, like you're doing things that kind of show that you really feel that you don't deserve it. One of these might come if you're up for your annual review and you are meeting with your boss and you're discussing salary and you don't negotiate your salary at all, even though you're supposed to. No matter how big of a raise that you're supposed to get, you're always supposed to negotiate it, but you don't because you feel like you might not deserve that raise. You also might present in not paying yourself first, which is obviously a good thing to do when you're saving, is, stashing away money for yourself. If you don't feel like you deserve it, well, you may not put that back for your future and for the benefit of yourself. So those are just a couple things that I thought of. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think, I think if you look at it and obviously I'm a geek, Lindy, as you full
Yes,
well
I know.
This country was based on Judeo-Christian values, and that Protestant work ethic is kind of ingrained in the DNA of the country. And if you buy into that, which I largely do, is the idea is if you serve and you help people, the more you serve and the more people you serve and help, the more you do deserve it. And if you think about it in that realm, then you could easily overcome this idea that you're not worthy, to get over this self-esteem issue. If you're a nurse, my dad was in the hospital recently, and I look at these caregivers in the hospital and their professionalism, their skill set, their empathy, kindness. I don't know how much they make, but whatever they made seems fair to me. I got no complaints. Not only do they deliver life-saving care, but they do it in a way that is again kind. And you look industry to industry, the work that we do, military service men and women, sociologists, psychologists, teachers. I mean, you look at any profession, even ones at first glance, truck drivers, that during the pandemic, we didn't realize how important they were, but then we had these men and women delivering goods and services, showing up at work, making sure we had food on the shelves and goods that we could get. And they were showing up at work despite the pandemic, despite the risks. You do deserve it. So I think it's self-defeating. And I think it is one of these that I find like disappointing when you find people that either from a macro standpoint or just even an individualistic standpoint, they have self-esteem where they don't think that they're worthy of financial success, and they can sabotage themselves in achieving greater success because they don't feel that they deserve it. And I think it's kind of sad.
I agree. Let's move on to the next toxic money belief. I can't handle money.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is common too. And it also is a little bit like the first one in terms of low self-esteem, where you think that it's beyond you to manage money well. I've met people, they'll say, I don't handle money well. And they use it almost as an excuse to do reckless, destructive things with their money, like gambling, like spending above their means, not paying attention to their nest egg. These are all destructive things that come from this toxic money belief. And the reality is that I'm an expert in the field. This is what I've immersed myself over the entirety of my career. And so I know a few things. But anyone with a little bit of effort and a little bit of time could learn and adopt some basic money habits to help them improve what they've been doing and to get ahead. One of them, of course, is to partner, to hire, to work with other professionals like we are here at Elliott Wealth Management, where I'm a certified financial planner, and our whole practice is built on helping people make good financial decisions and plan well and win with money. There's books on this topic, podcasts on this topic, magazine articles. There's other professions like CPAs, attorneys, financial coaches. You can, even if it's not your area of expertise, you can solicit help. And if you don't do so, then really, not to be mean, Lindy, you don't have anybody to blame but yourself. You could either learn it, which you should, and or get some help. But just to say I can't handle money and using that as an excuse to not get ahead financially, putting yourself and your family at greater risk because you're not building wealth and are not set up for financial success, that's just bad behavior. And it comes from this toxic belief that you can't handle money. And I think in many instances, it's just an excuse for bad behavior.
I agree. That was the number one thing that I had down, was that it's an excuse. But I think people make that excuse so they can just put it off, and they don't want to deal with it because it is maybe a stressful thing in life, or that it's intimidating because they don't understand, and they feel like they have to have everything in line to be able to handle money. But like you said, you don't. You pair with professionals, you educate yourself, but it is something that you actively have to do. You can't just sit by and say, I can't handle money, and expect for you to have financial success. It's just not going to happen that way.
Yes, it's something that you need to pay attention to. You don't need to be immersed in it like you and I are, but It's something that you do need to pay attention to, because if you don't, you're not only, what you said is, not only you're not going to be successful, you're likely to be harmed by it. I truly believe that if you don't pay attention to it, bad things are likely to happen, or something bad will happen, and the results of that will be magnified because you don't have your financial house in order. And, we have, each of us have younger, although they're getting older, but, we have children that are coming of age. And another strategy is, if it's not something that is a strength for you, and you don't feel comfortable seeking out a professional, although you should, and you don't feel comfortable or even knowledgeable about what to read or what to listen to, what to expose yourself to, ask somebody. You probably know somebody in your life that is more successful financially than you are. Family member, friend, boss, coworker, ask them, go to them. What are some tips? What do you read? What do you do? What did you learn? And that, even though it's a small step, might be the most important step in getting you going if you have been guilty of this toxic money habit. You mentioned stress, Lindy, while we were talking about I can't handle money, and that tees up the last one that we wanted to talk about on this episode, the money belief that money causes stress. And it's related to the I can't handle money, because sometimes people just, because they're ignorant about money and they feel that they have money troubles, they kind of just throw their hands up and walk away from it. And sometimes it could just be because they feel like it's stressful. So let's talk a little bit about that. First off, Lindy, you personally, because you've been in financial services for a while, but not your entire career. Did you find that this was something that you struggled with, being stressed about money in a toxic way?
Probably before I worked here, I was very stressed about money. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to handle it. But now, looking back, I realize that, and I'm kind of a self-proclaimed like horrible communicator. And that's one of the things that it boiled down to, is that I was a horrible communicator and I didn't talk about it. I didn't want to sit down and maybe have a hard discussion about money with my spouse. And after doing so and coming up with joint money goals and having something to work towards as a team, now it's fun to talk about money. It's not stressful. We sit down and we talk about our goals and, you know, what we're going to do, and we work on that together, and it's awesome. And I don't avoid the discussions anymore. Like we want to talk about it. But I did grow up, my parents fought about money, and I'm sure most people overheard conversations with their parents fighting about money, because that's the very common thing. So naturally, growing up with that, you're going to be hesitant about communicating with your spouse about money.
Yeah, so let's be clear with the listeners. Money causes stress. There is stress around money. If you don't have enough money,
yeah,
it's stressful. And then if you have a lot of money, it creates other stresses, like what to do with it, estate planning, taxes. If you run a business and you're successful, you might have ample money, but you're going to stress about the business. There's a lot that goes into it. But the idea that just money causes stress, I think I would swear, but we'll call it a family show. I think it's BS. To me, not having money is more stressful. I've had experiences when I didn't have money. That's way more stressful than experiences when you have money. But part of it is related to some of the other things we've talked about, is if you have a healthy relationship with money and you have a good plan, either because you have your own plan or you're working through a professional, like the work we do here at Elliott Wealth, a lot of that stress melts away. But if your default is money causes stress, it's another reason not to pay attention to it, not to confront it, not to seek it, not to take care of what you have. It's very, very destructive. And I have a family member, a close family member, you know, they kind of just live a simple life where they make just enough money to do what they want to do. Nothing more, nothing less, no great career ambitions, no aspirations to make more, be more, just a simple life. And in one aspect of this, Lindy, they don't hurt anybody. They don't hurt anybody. They're living the life they want to live. So non-judgmental, that's fine. But the flaw in that is sometimes they will probably look and say, Chris, you know, you run this business, you know, you're chasing the dollar and you have all these things going on. That's true. It does add some stress to my life, all these different moving parts involved in my financial life. But when this person has a negative event, even a small one, it's a financial crisis. If the car breaks down and you have no money in the bank and you have no financial wherewithal, that's a crisis. So that to me seems way more stressful than putting some time and effort into managing your money, being responsible, doing all the best practices that are out there in terms of making money and being a good steward of the money, because no money is very stressful. But even if you have no money, I was never very stressed out about money. And even today, Joelle and I will joke, you know, when we got married, we lived in, you know, a very modest condo. I'm going to show my age. I mean, I paid $40,000 for it. I bought it before we were married. And I think our mortgage payment at the time was like $450 or something like that. Again, I know I'm dating myself, but the point I'm bringing up is that we often say, well, look, if we just had to go back and live there, if we didn't have that much money, went out to live there, we'd be very happy. We'd be very happy. We are happy with the money we have, but we don't need the money to be happy. That removes a lot of the stress. We see a lot of people that they feel that money in and out of itself causes stress, and that's just toxic. It needs to be addressed. It's an important topic, not the most important topic, but not unimportant. So it needs to be addressed, but it's not and should not be the primary cause of stress, especially if that means that you're going to behave badly with money and have awful money habits. A lot of people, it's interesting, as we kind of finish up, Lindy, a lot of people that had financial insecurity growing up, they want to be financially successful because they don't want to go back to that stress.
Exactly.
And it's a driving force. And we hear that a lot with clients where they want to be financially successful. They want to be good stewards of money. They want to create a nest egg because they don't want to have that insecurity for themselves, for their spouse, for their children. And that's a very worthwhile motivator. And it's part of that American dream I mentioned in the first episode, the first part of this 3-part series. So this is the second episode, second part of the 3-part series. Lindy and I, listeners, will be back with you for the third part. Please subscribe so you don't miss out on the third part of the series and don't miss out on the show generally. Please subscribe. I would appreciate it a great deal. We'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial podcast very soon.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.